Okay, now this video is going to look at planning to avoid overtraining. This is our last dot point for what are the planning considerations for improving performance. Now the learn about for planning to avoid overtraining says you need to know about the amount and intensity of training, physiological considerations for such as lethargy and injury, and some psychological considerations such as a loss of motivation. The learn to go with this is to analyze overtraining by considering questions such as how much training is too much, how do you identify an overtrained athlete, what do you do if you identify an overtrained athlete, and then how can overtraining be avoided? Well, let's start with how overtraining can be avoided. Number one, periodization. You need to make sure that you're breaking down your macro, your meso, and your micro cycles. Make sure you're planning rests and breaks into each of those. Make sure that you're dispersing your high intensity training so that you're not doing large volumes of high intensity over the top of each other. You need to make sure that you're using recovery strategies, and you also want to make sure that your athlete is getting good nutrition and lots of sleep. And really, nutrition and sleep are key. You cannot recover properly if you don't have good nutrition and you're not sleeping well. So if you're eating sugar and taking energy drinks and just eating rubbish all the time, fast food, etc., you're not going to recover as well or as quickly as someone who eats more healthy foods. But you have to make sure the athlete is having a good balance, okay? And I remember watching a video on YouTube of the Chelsea nutritionist, and he was saying that he tells his athletes that they have to have a third of veg and fruit, a third of some kind of protein, and then a third of carbohydrates, and normally complex carbohydrates, to make sure that they're getting both their energy, so your energy foods are your carbohydrates, your recovery, which is all your proteins and stuff, and then there was also protective food, so that's all your vegetables and your fruits, because they're providing a lot of the nutrients to make sure you don't get sick, to make sure you don't get overworked, etc. The next bit we want to look at is amount and intensity of training. So overtraining is primarily caused when someone has high intensity training too frequently. So a high volume and a high intensity combined. That always results pretty much in an athlete overtraining their body. Now, when it comes to how much training is too much training, that really is going to vary and be very specific to the athlete, to their current context, their situation, and what's going on around them. So for example, you need to adjust your volume and intensity of training if your athlete is going through a major life crisis with some serious stress going on. If they're in the middle of a divorce, or if they've just had their grandmother die or something like that, then they're going to need to make sure that they cut back on their volume and intensity to deal with life stresses as well. They also need to consider things like how much sleep are they getting? Are they getting good nutrition? What recovery strategies are they actually using? All that should be thought about when we're looking at how much intensity and how much volume we're using of that intensity. We're going to make sure that we're not developing all of our different components of fitness which require high volume and high intensity. So for example, you don't want to be developing strength, power, speed, agility, and body composition all at once. You want to make sure that they are spread out, maybe develop two at a time, and then maintain them as you do the next ones. Okay, and particularly body composition. Body composition normally comes with a restriction of a diet, which means that nutrition is going to be very limited, and therefore recovery will take longer. Okay, and so we need to make sure we space out our volume and maybe even decrease our intensity. But normally it's about reducing the volume of training. And of course, making sure we are athlete specific will also include things like what skill level are they at, what fitness levels are they at, how high an intensity is this training really, how quickly is their body able to adapt. All those types of things need to be considered as you look at the amount and intensity of training for your athlete and their sport, making sure that everything is specific for them. Physiological considerations. When it comes to overtraining is essentially caused by the minor small tears that occur during a training session. Particularly high intensity training sessions, if you're developing power, speed, or strength or something, or you're doing a long session of cardiovascular, the athlete is going to get lots of small tears in their muscles, lots of small tears in their tendons and stuff that need to be repaired. And so you need to allow enough time for those tears and stuff to repair. If you don't allow enough time for those to repair before they have their next training session, then those sections of their muscles are actually going to be weak. They're going to get further damage occur to them. And if that happens over a period of time, that'll then result in larger injuries that the athlete will then need proper and serious rehabilitation for. So that kind of those small tears are often noticed by athletes. It's called DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness. That's essentially the pain that comes from those minor tears that occur during a training session. Now, one of the key things to repairing those is for the athlete to also have good nutrition. Okay, so they need to make sure they're getting plenty of carbs and proteins to make sure that that's going into their body. That'll be turned into the muscle or the tendon that needs to be repaired, and make sure that those small tears then get perfected and actually normally will increase in the size of the muscle and those type of things, because those tears are the stimulus for the growth in the muscle. But they're also going to need plenty of more vitamins and minerals to go with that. So B vitamins are used for transporting lots of nutrients around your body and are used for energy, to allow for energy. We also have vitamins like vitamin C or your antioxidants, which are very important for athletes, because they're breathing in more oxygen. It means that they have more oxidation in their body, and that needs to be recovered. So larger amounts of antioxidants are good to help recover that. They need minerals, so they need all their electrolytes to recover all the stuff from their sweat and stuff. We need to make sure that we are allowing this athlete to fully recover by giving them good nutrition and allowing them time to recover, to rest, so that those small tears recover. If they don't, then the athlete is going to be constantly in pain, which leads to lethargy, which is essentially fatigue. These athletes they're constantly in a state of fatigue. They're never coming to a training session refreshed and ready to go. They're coming there fatigued already, because they haven't recovered properly. It's going to lead to injury, and it's going to cause a decrease in performance. When we think of psychological considerations now, often psychological considerations, really we need to focus on a lack of motivation and a lack of focus. So motivation is different to lethargy. So if an athlete is lethargic, it actually means they've lost energy. It's not that they don't feel like getting up and training, it's that they actually are struggling to get up and train. And that constant pain causes them to then lose motivation, because you don't want to get up if you're in pain. You don't want to go and train again if you've been struggling already. And they're going to lose focus. They're not going to be sitting there focusing on their goals and, yes, I'm going to get up, I'm going to train, I'm going to get there, I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve. They're now sitting there going, no, I'm in too much pain, I'm not getting there, I need to do something else. So they're going to start to get that distraction coming in to their psychology. Now, in order to identify an overtrained athlete, we have our physiological signs and symptoms, and we have our psychological signs and symptoms. Our physiological signs and symptoms are going to include things like frequent errors, poor performance, illnesses, injury, poor technique, increases in resting heart rate, and the athlete being thirsty quite frequently. Okay, that's a big list, but they're the things you're looking for. The symptoms are things like the athlete being in pain, them feeling lethargic, having headaches, constant cramping, and a loss of appetite. Okay, so symptoms of what the athlete is feeling, signs of what you can see as a coach. Our psychological signs and symptoms are things like being moody and irritable, having poor responses to criticisms and trash talk, and then giving up in competition as things start to get hard. Some symptoms are going to be things like a lack of motivation, feeling depressed, being sensitive to criticisms, they might get emotional about that, or confusion during competition. So we're looking at these types of things, and really you're looking at someone who just is generally worn out. If you think of someone who is overtired, overworked, stressed, etc., that's essentially what an overtrained athlete is going to look like. If you identify an overtrained athlete, what should you do? Well, the basic and most common thing that you should do would be for you to decrease the training volume, and if you need to, also decrease the intensity. You might even need to give them a week off where they just get to completely rest and recover. If they're injured, you need to send them off to see some doctors, some medical help, make sure they get their rehabilitation done and that they are passing all their tests and stuff before they come back into their performance.